I'm white trash talking.
Hi, I'm Doug Johnson, and I'm White Trash Talking. So today I want to talk about the competition in artificial intelligence between the US and China, specifically between the US's OpenAI and China's new DeepSeek, an AI program unveiled in January of this year. As I mentioned recently, the US is waging a three-front war against BRICS, which includes Russia, Iran, and its ultimate target, China. The emergence of China's DeepSeek has not only shaken the US tech market, but has altered, perhaps forever, the dynamics of world power and control. Here's an overview from CNBC about the impact that DeepSeek is having on the US within the tech industry and global markets.
It was a technological leap that shocked Silicon Valley. A newly unveiled, free, open source AI model that beat some of the most powerful ones on the market. But it wasn't a new launch from OpenAI or model announcement from Anthropic. This one was built in the East by a Chinese research lab called DeepSeek. And the details behind its development stunned top AI researchers here in the US. First, the cost. The AI lab reportedly spent just $5.6 million to build DeepSeek version 3. Compare that to OpenAI, which is spending $5 billion a year. And Google, which expects capital expenditures in 2024 to soar to over $50 billion. And then there's Microsoft, that shelled out more than $13 billion just to invest in OpenAI. But even more stunning, how DeepSeek's scrappier model was able to outperform the lavishly funded American ones. It beat Meta's Llama, OpenAI's GPT-4o, and Anthropic's Claude Sonnet 3.5 on accuracy on wide-ranging tests, a subset of 500 math problems, an AI math evaluation, coding competitions, and a test of spotting and fixing bugs in code. Quickly following that up with a new reasoning model called R1, which just as easily outperformed OpenAI's cutting-edge O1 in some of those third-party tests. They accomplished all that despite the strict semiconductor restrictions that the US government has imposed on China, which has essentially shackled them out of computing power. China's breakthrough undermines the lead that our AI labs were once thought to have. Those chip restrictions from the US government, they were intended to slow down the race, to keep American tech on American ground, to stay ahead in the race.
What we want to do is we want to keep it in this country. China is a competitor and others are competitors.
So instead, the restrictions might have been just what China needed. It drove them to get creative, with huge implications. In other words, the adoption of a Chinese open source model at scale, that could undermine US leadership while embedding China more deeply into the fabric of global tech infrastructure.
According to Fortune magazine, investors dumped shares across the entire tech sector, including those of NVIDIA, ASML, and Alphabet. Goes on to say that investors, too, are now wary of claims that massive capital expenditures on chip and data centers are needed to fuel the AI boom. NVIDIA, the leading maker of AI chips, alone lost over $600 billion in value on Monday, following an almost 17% drop in its shares. The article goes on to say, last week, OpenAI claimed in a policy paper that there was an estimated $175 billion in global funds awaiting investment in AI projects. If the US doesn't attract those funds, they will flow to China-backed projects, strengthening the Chinese Communist Party's global influence, OpenAI said. On January 21st, OpenAI CEO Sam Altman announced the new Stargate project, a venture that pledges to invest $500 billion in its infrastructure across the US over the next 4 years. That $500 billion price tag isn't looking as attractive anymore. Here is Danny Haiphong to further contextualize the sudden rise of China's DeepSeek within the wider geopolitical landscape.
DeepSeek R1 demonstrates that China has the ability to innovate despite US economic sanctions and restrictions. The semiconductor chips that are so critical to the development of the technology like artificial intelligence, iPhones, computers, etc., have traditionally been the domain of the United States. But by sanctioning China, it forced the economic superpower to go its own way. DeepSeek R1 has already been adopted by top American universities and millions upon millions of ordinary Americans and people around the world. Of course, this is part of a larger geopolitical struggle that the United States and China find themselves in. A litany of economic measures have been leveled upon China in order to contain its rise. Meanwhile, China has decided that it will respond to tariffs and sanctions and any economic measure of restriction by strengthening its own domestic marketplace. China's technological leap cannot be contained. This DeepSeek R1 phenomenon symbolizes China's ability to counter all of these measures, from the sanctions to the tariffs and more. And it poses a major challenge not just to American tech dominance, but to US dominance itself. The US economy has been shrinking as the US economy deregulates and attempts to boost the profits of its investors and financiers on Wall Street. These financiers actually see investment in innovation as an impediment to their profits. In the United States, corporations and monopolies control the government. In China, the government regulates and controls the corporations. And shockingly so to so many, this actually allows corporations and innovations and developments inside of China economically to flourish, given that these companies have the support of not just their government, but their people. This is going to be a shock to the United States' overall posture towards China. The United States believes that it can control China, that it can defeat China, but we have seen now here that the US has lost to China, and in more ways than one. Because while DeepSeek R1 is showing off the technological advancements that China has been able to produce over the course of the past several years, even if not the last several decades, the problem for the United States is that it is falling behind in all areas of development, technology, and otherwise. But the question is, why has this occurred? Well, the United States has sold its innovation capacity, its industrial capacity, and its people down the river to the richest of oligarchs. The point here is that the United States' empire, its oligarchy, its financial and corporate dominant economic system has reached a point where it can no longer compete with the rising power of China. Because how the United States has responded over the last 15 years to China's rapid economic rise has been to encircle China all along its borders in the South China Sea and the Asia Pacific and otherwise. And this has been the strategy of the United States for so many years, to develop a regional bloc of countries that can surround China, that can cut China off economically, and that can eventually be prepared to wage war against it, whether it's over Taiwan or elsewhere. DeepSeek R1 has already shown that China knows how to internally develop in a manner that beats and defeats the attempt to contain it. How will the United States respond to DeepSeek R1, the early hack attack that DeepSeek faced, the plunging of the stock markets, Trump's promise to boost AI development in the United States? All of this is just the tip of the iceberg. What we can expect is a more aggressive posture toward China from here on out. And that means it'll be up to us to tell the warmongers, the neocons, the oligarchs who simply cannot compete with China peacefully, that they will not be able to wage war against China.
The release of DeepSeek set off a frenzy, and immediately the U.S. accused the Chinese government of using DeepSeek to gather data from Western users and to curtail free speech through censorship filters. Here's Carl Jha to address such propaganda and explain the flaw of the traditional Silicon Valley model.
This is what people like David Sachs were pushing. They're like, okay, you're letting China have access to all these data. But the thing is, it's open source. You're not subjecting everyone to Chinese censorship or handing data to China. DeepSeek, you can download it to your own machine and run it, and you can create your own interface. So to get rid of take out all the Chinese censorship filters and stuff. But then there's an argument of saying, oh, but what about a lot of the American users, average users who may not be tech savvy enough to download the DeepSeek and run it on their own machine? Rather, they will just use the DeepSeek server directly, download the client from their phone. Now, then China will gonna get their data, blah blah blah. But that's actually what OpenAI does. OpenAI doesn't allow you to download their stuff. Like you have to access OpenAI servers to upload all your data to OpenAI, and that's what they do. They design to, because there's whenever they talk about China, there's a lot of projection, because OpenAI is designed to suck up all your data from everywhere else. They're saying they're blaming China for that when it's completely opposite. You don't need you don't need to use DeepSeek servers. You can download the DeepSeek code to your machine and run it on your machine, so you don't have to upload your data anywhere. You can run DeepSeek without internet, which is not true for OpenAI. So they don't have to be as hardware intensive. And I think this is kind of pointing to the flaw into like the traditional Silicon Valley model. Like you went back in the Wintel days when Windows, Microsoft keep on coming out with this Windows bloatware, and you necessitate you buy more powerful Intel chips, right? But DeepSeek is looking at this. Okay, why don't we just optimize our software so it doesn't have to depend on the latest hardware, and that works. There's a lot of money in the whole AI bubble. This is why a lot of people are upset that DeepSeek kind of upset their apple carts.
One measure taken by the U.S. ostensibly to address Chinese exploitation of U.S. research institutions and intellectual property theft, among other supposed crimes, was to revoke foreign student visas to Harvard University, the majority of whom are Chinese. This act of desperation by Trump was blocked by a federal judge and is still pending. But the uncertainty it caused has generated a nearly 50% decline in Chinese student visa applications for all U.S. universities. Here's Carl Jia again to address this phenomenon.
My dad came to United States to study in 1985 as a PhD. When I visited him in 1990 in University, I went to his research lab. I look around, it's all Chinese grad students working there. I mean, for the past 20, 30 years, U.S. research institutions have relied on Chinese, Indian, Iranian, Russian, all the various foreign human capital. And this is one of the things that people used to say when they're trying to say, oh, we still have this one, United States has this one big leg up against China. That's because our ability to attract top talent from all over the world. Well, Guess what? Trump just shut the door on that. Trump just shut the door. And this is why Trump is my president. He's my president for accelerationism. This is like when Chinese people on the internet called Trump the nation builder and the nation being China, they're not kidding. They genuinely believe Trump is actually a Chinese spy, working for the goods of the motherland. But in practicality, that's how it's working out.
The more the U.S. tries to smother and dampen China's growth, the more self-reliant China becomes. This is a problem for the U.S., which sees China not as a peer competitor, but as an enemy that must be destroyed. The U.S. sees AI, as well as market growth in general, as a zero-sum game. Unlike China, which believes in multipolarity and mutual benefit, the U.S. believes in winner-take-all. The U.S. wants total world hegemony. Shyam Sankar, the CTO of Palantir, which leverages OpenAI models and which is positioned to benefit from the proposed $500 billion Stargate project, has this to say about DeepSeek and about U.S.-China relations in general.
We are at war with China. We are in an AI arms race. And I got into a disagreement with Sam Altman about this at the Senate AI Summit over a year ago, where I was arguing that we are in an AI arms race, and there's an opposing view that we can all get along and we can cooperate on these things. But this war started long ago. It was an economic war with the ascension of China to the World Trade Organization, the greatest IP theft in history, the greatest wealth transfer in history. It is an opium war. The number one cause of deaths of 18 to 45-year-olds in this country is fentanyl. That is coming from China. It is a diplomatic war. The Belt and Road Initiative is basically indentured servitude for other countries to the CCP here. But I think one of the things, China knows they're at war. The question is, we kind of equivocate on it as a peace-loving nation. But one of the things I want to make sure we all do realize is that the engineering in R1 is exquisite. The optimizations that they've done are really impressive. And I don't think you can get away with the facile explanation that the Chinese just copy and we're the only innovators. We have to wake up with the respect for our adversary and realize that we are competing. But they absolutely did steal a lot of that through distillation of the models, and perhaps they stole even more. And we have to realize that the AI race is winner take all, and it's going to be a whole of nation effort that extends well beyond the DoD in order for us as a nation to win. And that M-Day was yesterday. The time to mobilize has come.
Shyam Sankar's anti-Chinese propaganda, which I won't bother at this point to address, is consistent with Palantir's deep involvement in the Gaza genocide. Palantir's artificial intelligence platform, AIP, provides predictive intelligence, surveillance and targeting aids to the IDF, as well as predictive policing in the West Bank. Palantir will now be able to market their AIG product to other Western militaries, most notably the US's, as battle-tested or battle-proven. It seems almost certain that Palantir's AIG will be deployed against China one day soon. Thank goodness China has superior AI technology. Thank goodness that the US continues to get weaker while China gets stronger. If the US was planning on defeating China with AI and tactical nukes, as I have reported previously, they may now have to reconsider that plan. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and please leave a comment. I'll see you next week. Bye.